In this session, we will be discussing about the introduction to the nervous system. All of us know that there are two regulatory systems in our body. These are the nervous system and endocrine system. The nervous system, there are a network of billions of nerve cells linked together in a highly organized fashion to form a rapid control of the center of body. So the function of the nervous system includes it integrating the center of homeostasis, and it integrates the center of movements and almost all other body function. The mysterious source of those traits that we think of as a setting of human apart from the animals, this is also the function of the nervous system. So the difference between animal and human being is that their thinking capacity or their sense, common sense. So it is also a function of the nervous system. So once we see which are the basic function of the nervous system, the first one is sensation. The second one is after sensation, then it integrates and reaction. This is the basic function of the nervous system. So sensation means, for example, it monitors the changes or events occurring outside the body. That is, whatever the changes, if we are walking or if we are doing anything, what are the changes or what are the things? That is, these are called stimulus. These changes are called stimulus, any stimulus. And the nervous system is having the monitory cells. These are called receptors. So it monitor the changes through the special monitors called receptors. So receptor monitor the changes. Then after monitoring the changes is called a stimulus, that is from stimulus to the receptor. Then from this receptor, then it integrates. How it integrates? There is a parallel processing process and parallel processes and interpretation of the sensory information to determine appropriate response. From the receptors, it goes to the higher centers, and there it interprets what is the problem and what response has to be done. So the higher centers, the central nervous system, decide what is the issue and what response has to be done. Now the third basic function is that reaction. That is, once the central nervous system decides what response has to be done, then the reaction does. That is called motor output. That is the activation of the muscles or activation of the glands through the release of some neurotransmitters. So some neurotransmitter will be released, and according to what reaction has to be done, where the reaction has to be done depends upon the neurotransmitter is released. If it is a muscle reaction has to be done, the muscle has to be reacted. Or if it is a endocrine system or any gland has to be reacted, so that glands has to be, the hormones may be released. So these are the basic functions of the nervous system. So first one is sensation through the receptors. Then this sensation goes up, that is integration and interpretation will be done at the central nervous system, and reaction will be done. Now, we told there are two systems are there, nervous system and endocrine system. So there are some similarities also. They both monitor the stimulus and react to maintain the homeostasis. So even once we compare the endocrine system and nervous system, both monitor the stimulus and both react. Now what is the difference then? The nervous system is a fast reacting system. So its nervous system is rapid, fast acting system. Those effects do not always preserve. But endocrine system is a slower system. So through blood-borne chemical signals it reacts, and its action will be long lasting also. So difference is that nervous system is a fast acting system and its effect will be fast. At the same time, endocrine system is a slow acting system and its action takes much more time, but it is more lasting also. So that is the difference between nervous system and endocrine system. Now, once we discuss about the human nervous system, we can divide the nervous system into two parts. A central nervous system, which is the center, a central nervous system and a peripheral nervous system. Now, central nervous system consists of brain and spinal cord. So, central nervous system include the brain and spinal cord. It is the center of integration and control, or it is the center of interpretation and control. Now, peripheral nervous system. The nervous system which is outside the brain and spinal cord is called peripheral nervous system. So, it consists of spinal nerves and cranial nerves. Spinal nerves, that is, these are around 30, it is 31, there is 31 spinal nerves are there. It carry information from spinal cord, it is carry information from spinal cord and to spinal cord. So, there are 31 spinal nerves are there. And the cranial nerves, there are the 12 cranial nerves are also there, and it carry information from and to brain. So, human nervous system can be classified into two parts, divided into two parts, a central nervous system and a peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system means it is the brain and spinal cord. So, it is the center. And peripheral nervous system means it includes the spinal nerve and cranial nerve. Those which is outside the brain and spinal cord is called peripheral nervous system. Now, there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves are there. 31 spinal nerves are there. It gives information to the spinal cord and take information from the spinal cord. Carry from and to the spinal cord. And cranial nerves, there are 12 cranial nerves, 12 pairs of cranial nerves are there. It carry information from brain and to and from the brain. Now, we already discussed nervous system can be classified into two, a central nervous system and a peripheral nervous system. Now, again the peripheral nervous system can be classified into two, a somatic nervous system. That is, these are the voluntary nervous system, that is, which supplies to the skeletal muscles, especially to the skeletal muscle. It relays information to and from the skin and the skeletal muscle. Then there is an autonomic nervous system. These are involuntary nervous system. It relays information to the internal organs. Again, autonomic nervous system can be again divided into sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. So, nervous system can be divided into two, a central nervous system and a peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system can again be divided into somatic and autonomic nervous system. Somatic nervous system, which is the nervous system which supplies to the skeletal muscle and skin, and the autonomic nervous system is the nervous system which supplies to the sympathetic, autonomic nervous system is the nervous system which gives which supplies to the internal organs. It can be divided again into two, sympathetic and parasympathetic. Now, peripheral nervous system we already discussed. It is the nervous system which lies outside the central nervous system, that is outside the brain and spinal cord. So, it consists of various nerve which supplies to the limbs, trunk, head, neck, etc., the various parts of the body. So, peripheral nervous system is having two parts, spinal nerves and cranial nerves. There are 31 pairs of spinal nerves and there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves. So, peripheral nervous system can be divided into two, a skeletal or somatic system and an autonomic system. Now, again it can be divided into autonomic system, can be divided into sympathetic system and parasympathetic system. So, peripheral nervous system, so nervous system, central nervous system, Brain and spinal cord direct the mental and basic life processes. Peripheral nervous system, it is made up of axon and dendrites. It sends information to and from the central nervous system. Now, the somatic nervous system or skeletal sends sensory information to the CNS and motor messages to the muscles. And autonomic nervous system, it is involuntary and serves our basic life functions. Now, it can be divided into autonomic nervous system can be divided into two, sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system is the system which readies our body for a threat, and parasympathetic is the work of parasympathetic is just opposite of sympathetic, that is, it calms the body down and maintains the energy. So autonomic nervous system can be divided into two, sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic system which is the system which ready our body for a threat, and parasympathetic system is the system which calms down the body and it maintains the energy. Now, somatic system. Somatic system, it is also called, it is the system which supplies to the skeletal muscles. So, nerves, mainly nerves from brain and the nerves to and from the spinal cord. So, its main function is it controls the muscle movement and it's having somatosensory inputs. This somatic system produces both voluntary and reflex type of movement. So, there are reflexes are there, and spinal reflex is the one of some simple reflexes arc. Autonomic nervous system we already discussed. It's having two parts, sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So its main function is control the involuntary functions. So it controls the heartbeat, it controls the blood pressure, it controls the respiration, perspiration and digestion. It can be influenced by thought and emotion. So sympathetic nervous system, its main function is that is fight or flight. So we discussed there is sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system is the, so its main function is flight or fight. That is, it releases the adrenaline, sympathetic nervous system releases the adrenaline and noradrenaline, and it increases the heart rate and blood pressure. It increases the blood flow to the skeletal muscle and inhibit the digestive function. So it is the system which makes you ready to flight or fight response. Now parasympathetic system is just opposite to the sympathetic system. It makes you rest and digest. We can say it as rest and digest system. It calms down the body and conserves the maintenance of energy. It lowers the heartbeat, breath rate and blood pressure. So parasympathetic system is the system for rest and digest. So it calms down the heart rate, it lowers the heart rate, breathing rate, breath rate and blood pressure. Now, another two terms, afferent and efferent. Afferent means, afferent fibers are the fibers which carry information from periphery to the central nervous system. This is called afferent fibers. These are part of peripheral nervous system. So afferent fibers are the fibers which carry information from periphery to the central nervous system. Efferent fibers are the fibers which carry information from central nervous system to the periphery. So these are afferent and efferent fibers. Afferent means carry information from periphery to the central nervous system. Efferent means carry information from central nervous system to the periphery. Now another two terms, sensory and motor. Motor nerves are the nerves which supplies to the muscles. Motor nerves are the nerves which supply to the muscles. It may be skeletal muscle, it may be smooth muscle, it may be cardiac muscle, or even an endocrine gland. So motor nerves, which nerve supplies to the muscles and endocrine glands. And sensory means it brings information from periphery to CNS. So we can say afferent nerves are sensory and efferent nerves are motor. So motor nerve, which supplies to the muscles and endocrine glands, and sensory are afferent nerves, which bring information from periphery to CNS. So motor nerves to the viscera supplies to the smooth muscles, cardiac muscles and endocrine glands. And the visceral nerves are also known as autonomic nerves. Cranial nerves. We already discussed that there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves are there in the body. So these are the cranial nerves are the part of a peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system, there are two parts for the peripheral nervous system. Spinal nerves and cranial nerves. There are 31 pairs of spinal nerves are there and 12 pairs of cranial nerves are there. Now the cranial nerves, the cranial nerves, there are 12 pairs. Cranial nerves are the nerves which brings information from CNS to the to periphery and from periphery to the central nervous system, that is mainly to the brain. So brain to periphery and periphery to the brain. That is the function of central nervous system. That is the function of cranial nerves. There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves are there. So these are numbered as 1 to 12. The cranial nerve number 1 is known as olfactory, number 2 optic nerve, number 3 oculomotor nerve, number 4 trochlear nerve, number 5 trigeminal nerve, number 6 abducent nerve, number 7 facial nerve, number 8 vestibulocochlear nerve, number 9 glossopharyngeal nerve, number 10 vagus nerve, number 11 accessory nerve and number 12 hypoglossal nerve. Now we can classify the cranial nerve into 3 types, where depends upon whether it is a motor type of nerve, whether it is a sensory cranial nerve, whether it is a mixed nerve. So sensory cranial nerves are the cranial nerves which contain only afferent or sensory fibers. There are 3 sensory cranial nerves are there. These are cranial nerve number 1, that is olfactory nerve, cranial number 2 optic nerve and cranial nerve number 8 vestibulocochlear nerve. So 3 sensory cranial nerves are there. This contain only sensory fibers or afferent fibers. Second type of cranial nerves are the motor cranial nerves. So this contain only efferent fibers, that is motor fibers. So these are oculomotor nerve, trochlear nerve, abducent nerve, accessory nerve and hypoglossal nerve. These are the motor, this contain only motor fibers. Now there are some nerves which contain both motor and sensory fibers. The cranial nerve which contain both motor and sensory fibers. These are the trigeminal nerve, facial nerve, glossopharyngeal nerve and vagus nerve. So these 4 nerves contain both sensory and motor. So we can call it as mixed nerve. So cranial nerves can be classified into sensory cranial nerve, motor cranial nerve and mixed cranial nerve. Now the first nerve we will go through each nerves separately. Now the first nerve we already discussed is the olfactory nerve. Olfactory nerve is by the name itself we can understand it is the nerve of smell. So it carries special afferent of smell for smell. So the peripheral process act as receptors. Its peripheral processes act as receptors in the nasal mucosa, and the receptors are located in the roof and upper part of the nasal cavity. Now the central process return information to the brain, and the central process enter the cranial cavity through the cribriform plate of ethmoid bone. So central process, so there is the peripheral process of the nerve act as the receptors, then central process return the information to the brain, and central process enters the cranial cavity through cribriform plate of ethmoid bone. Now it is terminated by synapsing with the neurons in the olfactory bulb. So if there is any lesion or any injury, it causes anosmia. So the first nerve is the olfactory nerve. Now the second nerve is the cranial nerve number 2, optic nerve. So from the name itself you can understand it is the nerve of vision. So it is the it contains these are the special afferents for vision. So it returns information from photoreceptors in the retina to the brain, An optic nerve enters the cranial cavity through optic canal, and any lesions to this optic nerve leads to loss of light reflex and anopsia. So, second nerve is the optic nerve, that is nerve of vision. Third cranial nerve is the oculomotor nerve. It is composed of motor axon coming from the oculomotor nucleus and Edinger-Westphal nucleus in the rostral midbrain located in the superior colliculus level. So, cranial nerve number 3, it is the oculomotor nerve. It is composed of motor axons coming from the oculomotor nucleus and Edinger-Westphal nucleus in the rostral midbrain located in the superior colliculus level. It's a pure motor nerve. Now, it provides somatic motor innervation to the 4 extrinsic muscles of the eye, that is superior rectus, inferior rectus, medial rectus and inferior oblique muscle. It gives motor information or somatic motor innervation. Now, it also innervates the muscles of the upper eyelid and the intrinsic eye muscles, that is especially the pupillary eye muscles. So, together with the cranial number 3, cranial number 4 and cranial number 6 control all the 6 muscles of the eye. So, all these 4 cranial nerves control all the 6 muscles of the eye. So, oculomotor nerve. Next nerve, cranial number 4 is the trochlear nerve. Trochlear nerve provides somatic motor innervation to the superior oblique eye muscles. So, this cranial nerve originates at the trochlear nucleus located in the tegmentum of the midbrain at the inferior colliculus level and exits the posterior side of the brainstem. It's a pure motor nerve. Cranial number 5 is the trigeminal nerve. It is the trigeminal nerve is the largest cranial nerve. Now, it provides sensory information from the face, forehead, nasal cavity, tongue, gum and teeth, especially touch and temperature, and provides somatic and motor innervation to the muscles of mastication. Sensory information from face, forehead, nasal cavity, gum and teeth, and provides somatic motor innervation to the muscles of mastication. Now, this cranial nerve, trigeminal nerve is having 3 branches. These are ophthalmic nerve, maxillary nerve and mandibular nerve. So, it provides both motor and sensory information, that is, it giving motor information to the muscle of mastication, and the sensory, it gives sensory information, it takes sensory information from face, forehead, nasal cavity, tongue, gum and teeth. So, the sensory fibers are located in the trigeminal ganglion and the motor fibers are there from the nuclei of pons. Cranial number 6 is the abducens nerve. It's originated from the neuron cell bodies located in the ventral pons. And abducens nerve carries somatic motor innervation to the one of the extrinsic eye muscle, that is lateral rectus muscle. Next nerve is the cranial nerve number 7 is the facial nerve. Facial nerve is again a mixed nerve. It contains both sensory and motor component. It arises from the pons. Pons is a part of brainstem. It emerges through the opening of the temporal bone and stylomastoid foramen and having lots of branches. It carries somatic motor innervation to many muscles of facial expression. So, facial nerve is the main nerve which supplies to the muscles for facial expression. So, lesions of the nerve may cause a condition called facial palsy. It carries sensory information from the face again, especially deep pressure sensation, and taste information from the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. So, it's having motor and sensory part. Motor part supplies to the muscles of facial expression, and sensory information from the deep pressure sensation from the face, and taste sensation from the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. So, this is the sensory function of the facial nerve. Next cranial nerve is the vestibulocochlear nerve. It's a sensory nerve that conducts two special senses. The first one is hearing, second one is balance. So vestibular and audition. So it is called vestibulocochlear nerve. Next nerve, cranial number 9. Cranial nerve number 9 is the glossopharyngeal nerve. This is the nerve which innervate the pharynx, soft palate and posterior one-third of the tongue. It carries sensory information from pharynx and soft palate, especially the touch, temperature and pressure. Now it carries taste sensation from the taste buds on the posterior one-third of the tongue. The other part is done by the facial nerve. It also supplies to the carotid sinus and reflex control to the heart. 10th nerve is the vagus nerve. The peculiarity of vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve, innervating many structures in the throat, including the muscles of the vocal cord, thorax and abdominal cavity. It provides sensory information, especially touch, temperature and pressure from external auditory meatus and a portion of the external canal. It carries taste sensation from taste buds in the pharynx. It also provides sensory information from esophagus, respiratory tract and abdominal viscera. It provides visceral motor innervation to the heart, stomach, intestine and gallbladder. It is also a part of parasympathetic system or autonomic nervous system. Vagus nerve is a part of parasympathetic branch also. Now, 11th cranial nerve is the spinal accessory nerve. It's purely motor nerve. It's having two roots, a spinal root and a cranial root. Spinal root supplies to the sternomastoid muscle and trapezius muscle. And cranial root supplies to the muscles of the larynx, pharynx and soft palate. So, cranial nerve number 11 is the spinal accessory nerve. It is purely motor nerve and it's having two roots, a cranial root and a spinal root. Spinal root supplies to the sternomastoid muscle and trapezius, and cranial root supplies to the muscles of the larynx, pharynx and soft palate. Last cranial nerve is the hypoglossal nerve. This is the 12th cranial nerve. Hypoglossal nerve provides somatic motor innervation to the muscles of the tongue. Now, we discussed around all the 12 cranial nerves. We will just revise which are the cranial nerves. There are 12 cranial nerves are there in the body. That is, it gives information from brain to the periphery and from periphery to the brain. Number 1 cranial, it is the order is like that. It is 1 to 12. The first one is of olfactory nerve. Second one is optic. Third one is oculomotor nerve. Fourth one is trochlear nerve. Fifth one is trigeminal nerve. Sixth one is abducen. Seventh one is facial nerve. Eighth one is vestibulocochlear nerve. Ninth one is glossopharyngeal nerve. 10th one is the vagus nerve. And 11th one is accessory nerve. And the last one, 12th one is hypoglossal nerve. Thank you. This session we will be discussing about the basic structure of the nervous system, the basic component of the nervous system, that is neuron. We will be discussing about the anatomy, its function, anatomy and different types of neurons. So, neurons are the basic functional unit of the nervous system. So, nervous system, it contains billions of millions of neurons. Now, there are mainly, like we discussed about the nerves, there are different types of neurons are available. That is mainly based on the location and direction of the neuron which conduct the impulses. There are mainly 3 types of neurons are available. The first one is sensory neuron. Sensory neuron means it carry impulses to the central nervous system. Then there is motor neurons are there. Motor neurons are the neurons which carry impulses away from the central nervous system. And there are interneurons, that is, which carry information between other neurons. It is found only in brain and spinal cord. So there are 3 types of neurons are available. The first one is sensory neuron, second one is motor neuron, and the third one is an interneuron. Now, based on the fibers extending from the cell body, there are neurons can be classified into three. These are unipolar, bipolar, and multipolar. So, all the neuron will be having a cell body. From the cell body, a almost rounded cell body. From the cell body, only one extension is there from the cell body. This type of neuron is called unipolar neuron. If two extensions are there, that is, if one extension is there, it is only an axon. It will be cell body and axon. Now, if two extension is there, it means that one axon will be there, one dendrite will be there. So, this is called bipolar. Now, there is another type of neuron called multipolar neuron. Multipolar neuron have many dendrites and one axon. Usually one axon will be there. So, based on the fibers, number of fibers extending from the cell body, the neurons can be divided into unipolar neuron, only one extension will be there, bipolar, two extension will be there, that is one for axon and one dendrite, and third one is multipolar, it's having different, that is multi-extension, like many dendrites and one axon. Now, once we go through the anatomy of this basic unit, that is neuron, it's having, we can divide into two parts, a cell body or a soma and the processes. Two types of processes are there, dendrites and axon. All neuron contain one axon. Sometimes dendrites may be absent, or maybe one dendrite may be there, or many dendrite may be there. If dendrite is absent, so there will be a cell body and an axon. So it is called, there will be a cell body and an axon. So it will become a unipolar neuron. If one dendrite and one axon is there, so this will become bipolar neuron. And many dendrites may be there sometimes and one axon may be there. It become multipolar neuron. So all the neurons will be having a cell body and processes. Cell body, the processes may be dendrites and axon. So all the neurons will be having at least one axon. All the neurons will be having one axon. Sometimes dendrite may be there. Sometimes one dendrites may not be there. Sometimes one dendrite, sometimes multi-dendrites may be there. Then once we go through the cell body of the neuron, it's having one nucleus. So it's having the following, it's having the structures like nucleus is there, Nissl granules are there, mitochondria is there, neurofibrils are there. These are the main structures in the cell body. So there will be a nucleus, there will be a Nissl granules, there is mitochondria is there are neurofibrils are there. Nucleus is again like any other cell. This nucleus is also seen at the central region. That is, only one nucleus will be there which occupies the central region. And this nucleus does not have a centrosome. Centrosome is the cell for multiplication. It is for especially for the multiplication. So this neuron, as the centrosomes are not there, neurons cannot multiply, or neuron reproduction won't be there. So the first structure in the cell is the nucleus. Nucleus seen at the central region. That is, there will be only one nucleus. It is seen at the central region, and there is no centromere present. Then the second structure seen is the Nissl granules. These are small granules seen all over the soma, but it is not present in the axon hillock. Axon hillock is the area where axon attaches to the cell body. And these are Nissl granules are small cavities bound by plasma membrane. So Nissl granules are present all over the soma except in the axon hillock. And these are Nissl granules are small cavities bound by plasma membrane. Now, they are the actually fragments of endoplasmic reticulum to which ribosomes are attached. Nissl granules once there is the neurons get fatigued or any injury or anoxia is there. So at this time the nuclear granule become disappeared, and once there is a recovery, the nuclear granule become the reappear. So nuclear granules are seen all around the cell body except at the axon hillock, and once the neuron is fatigued or any injury is there, this nuclear granule disappear and reappear following and after a recovery. So the third structure which is commonly seen in the cell body is the mitochondria. It is present in the soma and it is the end axon, and it is the site of production of ATP. Now there is another structure called neuron fibrils. These are like thread-like structures which is travel all around the soma and dendrites. So neuron fibrils are the thread-like structures which is travel all around the soma and dendrites and axon, etc. So there are 4 structures commonly seen at the soma or cell body. These are the nucleus, nuclear granules, mitochondria, and neuron fibrils. Now the next part is the processes. Next part of the neuron is the processes. There are 2 types of processes commonly seen. These are the dendrites and axon. The axon, always one axon will be there. Dendrites may be 2, 1, sometimes it may be absent, sometimes it may be 1 or a multiple dendrites may be there. Dendrites may branch repeatedly, whereas an axon may branch only at the terminal ends. So axon will be branching at the terminal ends, but dendrites may branch anywhere, anytime. Axon is better known as nerve fiber. The axon may be modulated or myelinated or non-modulated or non-myelinated. Now what is meant by myelinated? Nerve fiber. That is, axon arises from the axon hillock. That is where the current junction, axon hillock is the junction between the soma and the axon. Now the central core of the axon, there is axoplasm. There is axoplasm which is semi-fluid in nature. So there is in the central part of the axon there is axoplasm, and it is covered by a covering called axolemma. Inside the axoplasm there is mitochondria and exoplasmic vesicles are there, but nuclear granules are absent in the axoplasm. So axon cannot synthesize its own protein. Now outside the axon there are certain sheaths called myelin sheath. Then outside the myelin sheath there is another sheath called neurolemma. Now once you see in the light microscope, there are lots of constricted areas are there between these myelin sheaths. These are called nodes of Ranvier, and majority of the nerve cells, nerve fibers in our body are myelinated nerve fibers. And also along with that, this myelin sheath is even present at the brain, spinal cord, preganglionic nerve fibers, etc. So these are also myelinated. Now, usually this myelination occurs at the fourth month of intrauterine life, and it completes a few years after birth. But not all. Pyramidal tracts remain unmyelinated at the birth, and myelination complete around the 2nd year of life. So usually myelination starts at the 4th month, but pyramidal tract remain unmyelinated at birth, and myelination occurs at the 2nd year of life, completes around the 2nd year of life. Now, in the peripheral nervous system, myelin sheath is formed of Schwann cells, whereas the central nervous system, the myelin sheath is formed of oligodendrocytes. Main importance, why the myelin sheath is there? It makes the action potential so fast, so that a fast action will be there. So the impulses will be passed very fast. So importance of myelin sheath is propagation of action potential in fast in myelin sheath. Now, other than neurons, there are some more other cells are formed in the nervous system. These are called neuroglias. In the nervous system, two types of neurons, two types of cells are present. The most important cell is the neuron. This is the basic structure, basic functional unit of the nervous system. There are some other type of cells are also present. So these are called neuroglias. So nervous system, there are two types of cells now. The first one is neuron, second one is neuroglia. There are three types of neuroglial cells are seen in the nervous system. These are astrocytes, microglia and oligodendrocytes. So three types of neuroglias are there: astrocytes, microglia and oligodendrocytes. Astrocytes, by the name itself you can understand its shape. It is star shaped, work as an intermediate agent for transferring substances between blood and neuron. So this is the anatomical basis of blood-brain barrier. Now microglia, its main function is that it acts as a phagocytes at the brain. The third type of cells commonly seen is the oligodendrocytes. So this form the myelin sheath around the nerve fibers. So they do not conduct impulses, but they have ability to divide and multiply throughout the life. Now the synapses. Synapses means it is the junction between two neurons where the information from one neuron is transmitted or relayed to other. There are three types of synapses can be seen in the body. Neuron, that is axodendritic, axosomatic and axoaxonic. So three types of synapses are there. Synapses is the junction between two neurons. So the junction may be between the axon and dendrite, or axon or cell body, or axon and axon. So three types of synapses are seen: axoaxonic, axosomatic and axodendritic, and synapses are the junction between two neurons. So the information collected by one neuron will be passed to the other neuron. So this is called synapses. Now, once at the zone of synapse, the terminal branch of axon enlarges, and this is called presynaptic node. If it is an axon or if it is a dendrite, the terminal branch of axon enlarges. This is called presynaptic node. Now the cell membrane of the presynaptic node is called presynaptic membrane, and at the same time the other neuron, it's also having a cell membrane. It's called postsynaptic membrane and postsynaptic node. So we have presynaptic node, we have postsynaptic node, we have presynaptic membrane, we have the postsynaptic membrane. Now this area between this postsynaptic membrane and presynaptic membrane is called the synaptic cleft. So the synapsis means a presynaptic membrane, synaptic cleft and postsynaptic membrane is together known as a synapse. Now in the presynaptic node, there are small vesicles containing chemical substance which act as a synaptic transmitter. So synaptic transmission is done by these chemical transmitters or synaptic transmitters. When the presynaptic neuron is stimulated, an action potential will be developed. So any stimulus which causes once the presynaptic neuron gets stimulated, or any nerves, any impulses coming from the neuron, the presynaptic neuron, an action potential will be developed. Now the action potential travels down the axon and reaches the zone underlying the synaptic vesicle in the presynaptic node. It causes this vesicle which contain the chemical transmitters get ruptured. The synaptic vesicle rupture and the chemical transmitter will be released. Now the chemical transmitter will be released to the synaptic cleft. Now the chemical transmitter combined with the receptors in the postsynaptic membrane. Postsynaptic membrane contains some receptors. So these chemical transmitters will be passed. The chemical transmitter is usually acetylcholine, and these chemical transmitters will be released in the synaptic cleft, and there are receptors are present at the postsynaptic membrane. As a result, a combination will be there. as a result of this combination, a local potential called synaptic potential will be developed in the postsynaptic membrane. Now, the synaptic potential may be two types of synaptic potential. So, once the chemical transmitter acetylcholine is released and the receptors will get activated, the receptors will combine with and there will be production of a synaptic potential. There are two types of synaptic potential is usually produced. The first one is an excitatory postsynaptic potential, and the second one is an inhibitory postsynaptic potential. So, a postsynaptic or a synaptic potential is created. It may be excitatory or inhibitory. If an excitatory chemical is transmitted, excitatory postsynaptic potential develops. When excitatory postsynaptic potential has sufficient strength, the postsynaptic membrane is sufficiently stimulated and develops an action potential. Now, if the chemical transmitter is inhibitory, postsynaptic membrane is hyperpolarized and postsynaptic membrane is resistant to the stimulus, and there is no propagation of action potential. So, this is the way the information is transmitted through the synapses. Thank you. Now, welcome back. This session we will be discussing about the neuromuscular junction. Like synapses, we already discussed what is synapse. Synapse is the junction between, it was the junction between two neurons. Now, the neurons, usually the motor neuron has to supply to the muscles. So, there should be a junction between motor nerve and the muscle. The junctional region between the motor nerve and the muscle fiber, or the junction region between the motor nerve fiber and the corresponding skeletal muscle fiber, is called neuromuscular junction. It is the junction between the nerve fiber and the skeletal muscle fiber. That is typical neuromuscular junction seen only in the skeletal muscle. Now, how the neuromuscular junction develops? The axon which supplies the impulses to the motor, that is, which the axon of the motor nerve, it approaches the muscle. As it approaches the muscle, it split into several terminal branches, and each terminal branches supply to each muscle fiber. So, the axon comes and it divides into different branches, and each branches supply to each muscle fiber. Once the terminal branches reaches close to the muscle fiber, it loses its myelin sheath. That is, usually I told you, axon is covered by a myelin sheath. Most of the part of the axon will be covered by a myelin sheath. As it approaches, as the terminal branches close to the muscle fiber, this loses its myelin sheath, and the terminal part of axis cylinder develops a bulb-like expansion. So, terminal myelin sheath will be removed and the terminal part will become a bulb-like expansion. Now, the cell membrane below the bulbous expansion, the cell membrane of the muscle below the bulbous expansion invaginate into the protoplasm of the muscle, forming a groove. So, there will be bulbous expansion. Below the bulbous expansion, there are there are cell membrane of the muscle. So, it forms a groove, forming a groove. It invaginates into the protoplasm of the muscle cells, forming a groove. The bulbous expansion lodges inside this groove. So, there will be a groove. There will be a groove which is formed in the muscle because there will be a groove formed in the muscle cell in the muscle, and this bulbous expansion lodges inside the groove. Now, the area between the bulbous expansion and the bulbous expansion and the sarcolemma of the muscle is known as neuromuscular cleft. So, we have the bulbous expansion, we have the sarcolemma of the muscle. The area between the sarcolemma and bulbous expansion is known as neuromuscular cleft. Now, there is bulbous expansion formed by the nerve, axon 5, axon part of the nerve. Now, the cell membrane of the bulbous terminal is called pre-junctional membrane. So, the cell membrane of the muscle fiber in the groove, the cell membrane of the muscle fiber is called post-junctional membrane. So, we can say the neuromuscular cleft as area between pre-junctional membrane and post-junctional membrane is known as neuromuscular cleft. So, we have the pre-junctional membrane, we have the post-junctional membrane, we have the neuromuscular cleft, together known as neuromuscular junction. Now, with the terminal bulb, a large number of synaptic vesicles are found which contain acetylcholine. Terminal bulb, there are large number of synaptic vesicles are found which contain acetylcholine. There are receptors which can combine with the acetylcholine present in the post-junctional membrane. So, inside the bulbous expansion, there are synaptic vesicles which contain acetylcholine. At the same time, there are receptors are present at the post-junctional membrane. So, acetylcholine is present in the bulbous expansion and receptors for the acetylcholine are seen at the post-junctional membrane. Now, what is happening in the how the transmission occurs? Now, upon the arrival of an action potential, the presynaptic neuron terminal, voltage dependent calcium channel open and calcium ion flow from extracellular fluid into the presynaptic neuron system. This influx of calcium causes neurotransmitter containing vesicles to dock and fuse to the presynaptic neuron cell membrane through snare protein. Now, fusion of the vesicular membrane with the presynaptic cell membrane result in the emptying of the vesicles content, that is acetylcholine, into the presynaptic cleft, and the process is known as exocytosis. Now, the acetylcholine is out from the presynaptic cells and it reaches the synaptic cleft. This process is called exocytosis. Now, acetylcholine diffuses in the synaptic cleft and binds with the nicotinic acetylcholine receptors found in the motor end plate. That is, motor end plate is the, we can say, the muscle fiber itself or the cell membrane of the muscle fiber. So, acetylcholine and diffuse with the receptors. Now, these receptors are ligand-gated ion channels. When they bind with the acetylcholine, they open, allowing sodium ions to flow in and potassium ion flow out of the muscle system. Because of the differences in the electrochemical gradient across the plasma membrane, more sodium moves in than potassium out, producing a local depolarization of the motor end plate known as end plate potential. Now, this depolarization spread across the surface of the muscle fiber and continues excitation, contraction, coupling to contract the muscle. The action of acetylcholine is terminated when the enzyme acetylcholinesterase degrades the part of the neurotransmitter producing choline and acetate group and rest of its diffuse away. The choline produced by the action of acetylcholinesterase is recycled and it transported back into the presynaptic terminal where it used to synthesize new acetylcholine molecule. So, like this, the transmission of impulses at the neuromuscular junction occurs. Thank you.